Hello, everyone. Today, something happened that until recently was considered a theory for closed reports and behind-the-scenes conversations. For the first time in the Ukrainian conflict zone, the use of a new generation guided missile under the designation Product 305 has been confirmed. And this fact has already caused bewildered questions in the headquarters of the North Atlantic Alliance. The specifics are simple and therefore frightening for observers. The strike was carried out from a distance that goes beyond the usual framework of counteraction, and the target was hit with high accuracy. Let's immediately outline the route of our conversation. We will analyze what exactly Product 305 is, why its appearance now changes the logic of combat operations, and what the information about the extension of the flight range to almost 50 kilometers will lead to. Along the way, we will answer two questions that are still up in the air. Why were the air defense systems not ready for this scenario? And what does this mean for the coming weeks of the conflict? Watch until the end, because it is in the finale that a complete picture will emerge. Fact 1. The light multi-purpose guided missile, known as Product 305, was developed as a high-precision weapon for Army aviation. Its carriers were attack helicopters, including modernized machines of the K-MOV family, used in the special military operation since the spring of 2022. The initially declared range with visual control by the operator was about 15 km, which already exceeded the capabilities of most man-portable air defense systems supplied to Ukraine. Why is this important? 15 kilo for a guided missile with a television homing head means that the helicopter crew can work without entering the zone of confident destruction. The operator sees the target in real time, adjusts the flight, selects the point of impact. This is not a blind launch, but a conscious defeat. For the battlefield, this means a sharp increase in efficiency against fortifications, warehouses, and command posts. What does this change? Already at this stage, the Ukrainian side was forced to disperse equipment and hide it deeper, which slows down maneuvers and complicates control. But this was only the beginning. And here we come to the next turn, which is still being discussed in whispers. Fact 2. According to information from industry sources, current developments on Product 305 allow increasing the range of corrected flight to 45, and possibly even 50 km. I emphasize that we are not just talking about a ballistic throw, but about maintaining controllability and transmitting images to the operator over a significant part of the trajectory. Why is this important? 45 km radically changes the geometry of the battle. This is the distance at which the vast majority of existing medium-range air defense systems either cannot reach the target or operate at the limit of their capabilities. The carrier helicopter can be deep in its rear, using the terrain folds, and at the same time hit targets that were previously considered relatively safe. What does this change? For NATO analysts, this means the need to revise threat models. If earlier the helicopter was considered a vulnerable element, now it is turning into a long-range strike platform. And here arises the first serious question, which we will definitely reveal further. Are Western systems ready for such a scenario? But first, one more important layer. Fact 3. Combat use of Product 305 in the conflict zone has shown high accuracy and resistance to electronic warfare. The missile is equipped with a communication channel that allows the operator to change the target even after launch, which is especially valuable in a dynamic environment. In one episode, confirmed by video footage, the target was hit after the missile maneuvered when the initial object was hidden by smoke. Why is this important? In modern warfare, smoke, aerosols, and jamming have become commonplace. Weapons that lose effectiveness at the first counteraction quickly become obsolete. Here we see the opposite. The system remains operational and the person remains in the decision-making loop until the very strike. What does this change? This reduces the likelihood of accidental misses and increases the selectivity of the use of force. For commanders, this means greater confidence in the result, and for the enemy, the need to spend resources on more complex camouflage. And it is at this stage that nervousness begins to grow in Western headquarters, because the usual patterns do not work. Let's stop for a second and think together. Write in the comments, did you expect that helicopter weapons would reach such distances in a real conflict and not on exhibition stands? And we move on, because the most interesting layer is ahead. Fact 4. Extending the range to 50 km is achieved not only through the engine, but also through optimizing the flight profile and improving communication channels. The missile can follow a higher trajectory and then descend towards the target while remaining controllable. This is a complex engineering task solved in a short time against the backdrop of combat use. Why is this important? Usually, such upgrades require years of testing. Here we see an accelerated cycle dictated by the real needs of the front. This speaks to the high adaptability of the defense industry and close ties with the troops. For the enemy, this is bad news, because the time lag between the appearance of a threat and the response is reduced. What does this change? Strategically, this means that the window of vulnerability for counteraction becomes narrower. While new measures are being developed, the system is already moving further. And here we come to the moment that many underestimate. Fact 5. Most Western air defense systems supplied to Ukraine are optimized to combat aircraft, cruise missiles, or drones. A helicopter with a long-range guided missile falls out of this logic. It does not enter the kill zone, but delivers precise strikes. Why is this important? This is an asymmetry when a relatively inexpensive platform forces the enemy to use expensive means or change the entire configuration of defense. In conditions of limited resources, this is critical. Every movement of the battery, every new radar, this is time and money. What does this change? At the operational level, this can lead to the exposure of other areas of the front. It is here that the second open question arises, which we promise to analyze. How quickly can you adapt to a new threat? The answer is not so optimistic for Western strategists. Product 305 is not just a missile. This is a symbol of the transition to a new level of Army aviation application. A range of 50 km. Controllability, resistance to interference, and real combat confirmation create a combination that breaks old ideas. The emotional conclusion here is simple and strict. While NATO analytical centers are building models based on past conflicts, reality has already moved forward. The appearance of such weapons in the Ukrainian conflict zone shows that the technological competition is not going according to textbooks, but according to the strict laws of the front. And whoever adapts faster gets the advantage. What does this mean in the near future? In the next week, we may see changes in tactics, deeper strikes on infrastructure, and an even greater role for helicopters as long-range strike assets. This is not a question of escalation. It is a question of efficiency. The world is once again seeing how quickly war is changing before our very eyes. The story with Product 305 is a reminder that underestimating the enemy always comes at a high cost. Today, it is Ukraine. Tomorrow, everyone will draw conclusions. Write how you assess this turn and what consequences you consider the most significant. Dialogue is important because understanding reality begins with an honest conversation. And here it is important to take another step deeper. Because behind the dry formulations about range and efficiency lies a broader process that is rarely discussed aloud. We are talking about a change in the philosophy of using high-precision weapons at the tactical level. Previously, such opportunities were the prerogative of strategic aviation or expensive missile systems. Now, a similar effect is achieved by Army aviation assets that operate closer to the line of contact and react faster. The next fact: a helicopter with Product 3005 gets the opportunity to conduct the so-called hunt according to external target designation data. This means that the target can be detected by a drone, a reconnaissance group, or electronic intelligence assets, after which the coordinates are transmitted to the crew. The helicopter does not even have to see the target visually at the time of launch. It goes to the area, launches a missile, and already during the flight, the operator receives an image and makes a final decision. Why is this important? This destroys the usual connection. Discovered, flew up, struck. Now distance and time appear between these stages, which work in favor of the attacking side. The enemy may not even understand where the strike came from, and this seriously affects the morale and controllability of units. What does this change? There is an effect of constant threat in the depths of the defense. Command posts, communication centers, ammunition depots that were previously considered relatively protected are forced to either go even further or spend resources on strengthening cover. And there are no endless resources, as we know. And here, the tension begins to rise in earnest. Now let's look at the reaction of Western observers. Officially, it is restrained. The formulations are accurate, but the word unexpected is increasingly heard in specialized reports. Unexpectedly high range, unexpected resistance to interference, unexpectedly fast modernization cycle. For military analysts, this is a worrying signal because it means a loss of predictability. One more fact. Some sources indicate that the potential for further development of Product 305 has not yet been exhausted. We are talking about a possible improvement in the data transmission channel and expanding the range of targets, including moving objects with higher speed. This has not yet been officially confirmed, but the very possibility of such development is being actively discussed. Why is this important? Moving targets are the next level of complexity. If the system works confidently on them, this means a threat to convoys, reserves on the march, and even individual elements of air defense. In fact, the battlefield becomes more transparent for one side and more dangerous for the other. What does this change? This forces the enemy to either constantly change positions or accept the risk of a sudden strike. In both cases, the stability of the defense suffers. And here we come to the very moment when quantity turns into quality. The culmination of this whole story lies in a simple but harsh conclusion. The use of Product 305 and information about the sharp increase in its range show that the conflict in Ukraine has become a testing ground for solutions that will determine the nature of future wars. This is not an experiment for the sake of experimentation. It is a response to specific threats, tested in real conditions. Emotionally, this is perceived as a cold shower for those who are used to believing that technological superiority always remains on one side. Reality is more complex. It shows that betting on adaptation, speed, and practical experience can negate even a serious quantitative lag. In the near future, we will most likely see increased discussions, new reports, and possibly attempts to urgently close the identified vulnerabilities. But time is a stubborn factor. It does not go back. And every day of combat use of such systems reinforces new rules of the game. What does this mean for the region and for the world? This means that the era of local conflicts with a limited set of means is coming to an end. It is being replaced by a time when even tactical weapons have a strategic impact. And the sooner all participants realize this, the fewer illusions there will be, and the more sober decisions will be made. But there is another layer to this story that rarely makes it into the reports, although it explains a lot. Any new weapon is tested not only for range and accuracy, but also for how it fits into the overall system of troop control. And here, Product 305 has proven itself not as an exotic novelty, but as an organic element of a related multi-level structure. The next fact: the use of these missiles is increasingly linked to a unified reconnaissance and target designation circuit, where unmanned aerial vehicles, ground observation posts, and aviation operate. Information is transmitted almost in real time, and the decision to strike is made quickly, without multi-stage approvals. This was noted in a number of episodes in the eastern direction, where targets were destroyed shortly after they were discovered. Why is this important? The speed of the cycle from detection to destruction has become a key indicator of efficiency. When this cycle is reduced to minutes, the enemy loses the opportunity to react. He does not have time to change position, does not have time to build a layered defense. This is pressure that acts constantly and exhausts. What does this change? Commanders on the ground begin to think differently. They understand that any delay, any mistake in camouflage can be used against them almost instantly. In such conditions, the role of discipline, dispersal, and autonomy of units increases. And this is already a serious challenge for an army accustomed to centralized management. Now let's pay attention to the psychological effect. It is not measured in kilometers or kilograms, but often decides the outcome of episodes. Messages about pinpoint strikes from long distances quickly spread through units, acquire details, and are amplified by rumors. Even if they are not officially spoken about, a feeling of constant observation is formed at the level of personnel. Why is this important? The fear of the unknown is always stronger than the fear of a clear threat. When a soldier understands where the shell is flying from, he looks for cover. When the threat comes unexpectedly and from the depths, it undermines confidence. In the long term, such an effect may be no less significant than physical losses. What does this change? There is pressure on the command to strengthen protection, transfer additional means, change deployment areas. All this again comes down to resources and time. And here we see how one technological innovation triggers a chain reaction of consequences. It is also interesting how the attitude towards helicopters is changing. For a long time, they were considered vulnerable machines, dependent on the weather and the saturation of the battlefield with air defense assets. Now, they are increasingly acting as carriers of high-precision weapons, working at a distance and in close conjunction with intelligence. Why is this important? This returns strategic importance to helicopters at the tactical level. They cease to be just support for infantry and become an instrument of influence on the depth of the defense. For planning operations, this opens up new opportunities and at the same time complicates the life of the enemy. What does this change? We can expect further development of this concept, the emergence of new tactics, and possibly new modifications of weapons. And each such step will be tested again and again in real conditions and not on paper. As a result, this whole story with Product 3005 adds up to a clear picture. This is not a one-time episode and a failed experiment. This is a marker of how quickly the nature of war is changing and how important it is to be able to learn right during the conflict. Those who succeed get the advantage. Those who are late are forced to catch up. And here, I want to involve you in the conversation again. Do you think this approach will become the standard for future conflicts? Or are we seeing only a transitional stage? Write your opinion, because it is in such details that an understanding of large processes is born.